If you're in the situation where it feels like you've reached out to every single literary agent under the sun and you have only received rejections, then this is the video for you. I certainly know how disheartening that feeling can be, and I want to equip you with some information and tips so that you can feel productive and figure out what your next steps may be. I've worked on all sides of the publishing industry, at a publishing house as well as at a literary agency, and now I work directly with writers to prepare their manuscripts for submission to literary agents. And I am really passionate about helping writers out of this so-called querying rut and really help them figure out how to progress forward in their publishing journey. So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 productive things that you can do right now if you are in that position where you have received rejections from agents and really don't feel like you have any options left for querying. If this type of content is helpful for you and you are anywhere along the book writing, querying, or publishing process, I recommend subscribing to my channel. I talk a lot about the publishing industry, about literary agents, and offer tactical tips for how to strengthen your book manuscript. So I'd love to have you around. So let's dive in with the first thing that you can and should do if you are in the querying rut and you can't seem to get a literary agent. That is enlist beta readers or a professional editor. Now, I strongly advise against querying literary agents if no one else has read your manuscript or read your book cover to cover. Even though in some cases it might work out where you are the only person who has read the manuscript and you get a literary agent, certainly that does happen. But in the vast majority of cases, your book would be so much stronger if you had gotten some critical feedback. And when we're talking about reaching out to literary agents, you really only get one shot of reaching out to each individual agent with that specific book project, so you want to make sure you are giving it your absolute best. It is so difficult to self-edit, especially if you're working on a novel. So getting some kind of editorial feedback about how the plot, the characters are developing is only going to help you tell a better story. And a better story is more likely one that agents are going to respond to. So if you're in the position of only receiving rejections from literary agents and you really haven't had a substantial constructive critique from anyone on your book project, do that now. Now, it really doesn't count if someone has read your manuscript, but it's a friend or a family member and they just gave you some general feedback like they really liked it. That's not really helpful to you because you don't know, A, if they're being honest, and B, unless you've written the absolute perfect book, there is always room for improvement. So that feedback really isn't going to help you achieve the next level for your story. So when I'm talking about reaching out to a beta reader or a professional editor, this should be someone whose opinion you trust. Someone who has experience in the publishing industry, perhaps, or someone who you have had a writing workshop with and you really respect their writing and you trust their editorial judgment. If you do want to go the professional editor route, I have a video on how to choose an editor, so I recommend checking that out. My next tip for what to do if you have only received rejections from agents and maybe you already have received extensive editorial feedback is to wait and try again later. The publishing landscape is always changing. That goes for the types of stories that agents and publishers are looking to acquire, as well as the actual people in the industry. Like any other industry, people are rotating in and out constantly. So if you wait, 6 months or even a year to query your book project again, that could put you in an entirely different publishing landscape than you were in originally. For example, we know that literary agents are very overwhelmed with submissions right now, potentially because a lot of writers were working on book projects during the quarantine period and now are looking for representation for those projects. So perhaps in a year from now, it'll be a different situation and agents will have much more time to respond to queries and take on new clients. Also, there are likely going to be new agents who are entering the industry and building up their list in 6 months to a year from now, and they could be potentially the perfect fit for you. Also, it may be the case that an agent who would be the perfect fit for your project is closed to submissions right now just because they are overwhelmed and have a lot of client work to take care of. But in 6 months to a year, maybe they open back up for submissions, and so that puts you in the perfect position to reach out to them. Now, the one thing I will advise here is that you should not reach back out to the same agent who has already rejected you for that specific book project, because that will look unprofessional unless they have specifically said, reach back out to me in 6 months or a year or some amount of time. The third thing on my to-do list for writers who can't seem to find a literary agent is to simply focus on your next project. I feel like writers often have the misconception that if you don't get a literary agent with this one project that you are querying right now, then your chances are null and void and you're never going to get a literary agent. And that is not true at all. There are many cases in which, maybe you put this project aside and you work on something totally different, or maybe something in a similar style or similar genre, and that is the book that actually scores you representation. So do not think that just because you haven't gotten a literary agent yet, that it is game over for you and there is no hope for representation because this book didn't work out. So if you have another idea for a book, or maybe an outline, or maybe you've started writing it, dive into that project and let this one sit for a little while. And then once it gets to a good place, you can query that one. Keep in mind that when you queried literary agents with your original book project, there's a chance that some of them might say something like, this genre or this particular book is not for me, but I really like your writing, so if you write something else, come back to me. And so if you work on something else, that's gonna put you in a great position to reach back out to those agents and say, you didn't respond to my first project, but here's another one, and I'd love to see if you like it. And the good news here too is that once you get a literary agent, you can always revisit that initial project that never got representation. If it's still unpublished and it's still, sitting on your shelf somewhere waiting to find its place in the world, you can talk about that project with your literary agent and say, hey, I know we're gonna move forward with, my third book that I wrote, but there's this one that I wrote, years ago, and I'd love to see if you think that we could potentially publish it as well down the line. So the takeaways here are: 1, you can certainly still find a literary agent even though this first project has not found one, and 2, that project that you're working on now can still potentially find a publishing home down the line. My next tip for what to do if you are only getting rejections from literary agents is to spend some time honing your craft. Now, no matter where your writing skill set lies, there is always room for improvement to become a stronger and more effective storyteller. Now, if you're in the earlier stage of your writing career, or maybe just began working on your craft, then it could be the case that maybe you have a great idea for a story, but your actual writing isn't quite to the level yet where a literary agent would be eager to take you on. So in that case, it's a really great idea to just work on your writing and have fun with it. Some things that you might do to hone your craft are attend writing workshops where you are in a group where people are reading each other's works and giving feedback and critique. You could write and try to publish short stories, and if you do publish a short story, then most likely you're going to have some kind of engagement with the editor at the literary magazine, and that can be really helpful, especially if you're working on a full-length novel, because some of the feedback that they give you for your short story might actually apply to your novel and help you write an even stronger novel. And the good thing about writing and publishing short stories is that it gives you writing credentials that you can reference when you are querying literary agents, and you don't need a literary agent to submit to literary magazines. So it's kind of a win-win situation, especially if you're working on fiction. Another way you can hone your craft is attend writing conferences. A lot of them are virtual now, which is really cool because that means you can be with writers all across the globe who you may never have met otherwise. And the last way to hone your craft is to read and watch writing resources. Hopefully this channel is a place where you can go to find some of those. My final tip for what to do if you can't get a literary agent is to consider self-publishing. Self-publishing can be a really great option if you really feel like your story is ready to go into the world, you've worked on it, and it feels finished to you, and you don't really want to operate by the long timelines that traditional publishing can take. It also allows you to have full control over when your book gets published, how it gets published, what it looks like when it gets published. So if that appeals to you, self-publishing can be a great option. Keep in mind, however, that you cannot query manuscripts once they have been self-published. So that is going to be the end of that specific book's journey. However, you can, of course, query future projects that you don't self-publish if you are still interested in seeking literary agents representation down the line. I have a video where I collabed with an author tuber and self-published author where we talk through all of the pros and cons of self-publishing, so I recommend checking that out if you are considering between the two options. I really hope this video gave you some inspiration and helps you get out of the rut that I know it can feel like you're stuck in when you just receive rejections from literary agents and don't know where to go next. The worst thing you can do is stop writing, so please don't do that, and please follow these tips to help reinvigorate your writing passion. Let me know in the comments what your experience has been with querying, and please know that it is a safe space to vent if you have been getting rejections. In fact, I think it's very productive for other people to see what other aspiring authors are going through and how many rejections they've gotten, because I want you to know that this is part of the process and you are not alone. Another video you might check out if you are along the querying journey is my video on if you are ready to get a literary agent. In that video, I go through all of the things that you need to ensure you've done before you query, so that can also help you out if maybe you need to go back to square one and rethink if you're ready to get a literary agent to begin with. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It would mean a lot to me and help me grow this community that we've built. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.